Hey everybody. So today we're with the Civic Si here in the garage, and what we're going to be doing is we talked about in the previous couple of autocross videos how we want to put a rear sway bar on. So what I've done is I've ordered this Eibach 22mm rear sway bar for the car. So we're going to be going through the installation process of this today and then comparing the car before and after. So we have our runs from autocross with the stock suspension, and then we're going to put this on and do runs at autocross and see how the car does. So a rear sway bar is an easy modification you can make to your car, especially front wheel drive car. You probably want to do a front sway bar on a rear wheel drive car, but it's a good way to kind of liven up the steering of the car a little bit and make the steering feel more responsive. So the way it does this is when you're cornering, the weight of the car will shift to the outside, and when it does this, it's going to put a load on the spring that's on the outside of the car, but the sway bar connects the two sides of the car, the two springs, and so as the car is rolling, the sway bar will actually push up on the other side and keep the spring that's on the inside from extending. So it'll help to control that motion, but it comes at the expense of the inside tire isn't allowed to extend and force the tire into the ground while cornering. So while it helps to reduce roll and make the car turn in faster, it can also lead to lift-off oversteer. So most front-wheel drive cars from the factory are designed to prevent lift-off oversteer, and in most cases you won't experience that with stock suspension, but when you put a sway bar on, it is a possibility. So it's something to be aware of if you're modifying your daily driver and you live in an area where it rains or snows, just to be aware of it and probably take some driver education on how you would deal with that scenario if it were ever to happen. But we'll get into installing the sway bar. So inside of the box, lots of packing material, pretty standard fare. So it comes with the bar itself, and then it comes with new sway bar mounts that will attach to the frame of the car, or attach the sway bar to the car. And then we're going to be reusing the OEM sway bar end links, although you can get adjustable end links if you want. But in this scenario, this bar is designed mostly for the OEM links, and there's no penalty for using the OEM links. And then it comes with some stickers, if you want to put stickers on your car. So let's get the car on jack stands. So to jack the car up, since we need both sides of the car in the air at the same time, instead of using the pinch welds along the side of the car, what I'm going to do is on the rear subframe here, there's these little brackets present, and so what I'll do is I'm going to try using these brackets to jack up the car, and if it doesn't work, I will let you know it doesn't work, so that way you don't damage your car. So removing the sway bar is pretty simple. We have the two bolts over here on each side, so that's the bracket that holds the sway bar in place. So we'll just remove those, and then either remove the top end link bolt while it's on the car if you don't have impact wrenches, or removing the lower end link mount is the way to go, and then you can take the end link off of the bar once it's out of the car. The sway bar should slide out. It'll require a little bit of manipulation to get it out. It's kind of tight. The instructions that come with the Eibach kit are pretty generic. So it was saying that you need to drop the exhaust off of the hangers. But for the Civic Si, we shouldn't need to do that. So a quick tip is a longer socket helps to clear this bracket. So just something to consider if you have longer sockets, is it might be easier to get in here where I have the longer socket on that top bolt, and then it just comes down and I can work with it here. So once you remove all the threads on this bolt, or you've turned it enough to break all the threads loose, you just have to pull this out, and what you can do is you can use a punch through this end here and tap it with a hammer a couple of times, although usually underneath the car there's not a lot of room. But what I just found works pretty well is I just put a wrench on here, so a smaller diameter, and then I can just kind of pry it loose. And now that we're most of the way out, we should be able to just remove this the rest of the way. One thing that helped to remove it as well is I just came around the top here and pushed on the sway bar just a little bit to relieve a little bit of tension that was on the bolt. Alright, so now with the bolts removed, the sway bar is free, so we should be able to get the sway bar out of here with some clever manipulation. So with the bar out of here, what helped to remove it was taking the brackets off, so they just kind of push off of the rubber piece here. And then in retrospect, it would have been easier to take it out if the sway bar end links weren't in place. So it looks to be a 17 millimeter, and there is a hex on the end of this to keep the ball joint from spinning if it's preventing difficulties from loosening it. So you can put your Allen key in place to hold that, and then you can remove it from there. So if you did things in the wrong order like I did, the impact wrench I have actually helped a lot to get these off. So instead of trying to brace the sway bar while putting a wrench on it, impact wrench just took the nuts right off. But what I want to do really fast is just compare the weights of the two sway bars. So I've got the stock sway bar here. We'll get it on the scale. Okay, so we have the stock sway bar here at 4 pounds 5 ounces. So we'll just weigh the Eibach sway bar really fast and see how it compares. So actually very comparable, only a couple of ounces more than the previous sway bar, which is nice to see that we're adding material to the sway bar, but we're not really adding any weight. So not really sure what Eibach did to pull that off, but it's no weight penalty, so that's nice. So what's different about the aftermarket sway bars is they'll usually have multiple points of adjustment. So here we have 2 with the Eibach, whereas stock is just 1 point. And the more holes you see means more adjustment. And there's some different designs as well you'll see out there, but this is a pretty typical setup. One thing you can do is if you want to go for like a middle ground, you can set one side to the stiffest setting and then the other side to the soft setting, and it's kind of an in-between setting, which is a valid way of setting these up. So if you want a little bit of an in-between, you can try that out. Alright, so now it's time to get this on the car. So our first step will be to put the bushings in place on the sway bar. And so what you're going to do is you're going to use the supplied grease to grease the inside of the bushing here, so that way your sway bar can move and doesn't bind. So you want to make sure you properly lubricate it, but you don't want too much because that could almost cause a binding issue. And you don't want to go too thin either, because then you'll have the bar contacting this polyurethane material without any lubricant. And as we can tell from the stock sway bar, the bushings are almost out on the end. So we'll start by putting the bushings out towards the end here, and then we'll just have to make some fine adjustments once we get to the car and make sure we have everything lined up properly. Now what you can do is the bushing actually splits, so it will pull apart here, and that's how we're going to get it around the sway bar. Okay, so I have the grease here, and I'm just wearing a glove so I don't get it all over my hands. So then I'll apply some to the inside of the bushing. I'll get both sides. And what I'll do is I'll use my finger, just kind of smear around on the inside make sure we get even coating. So we'll be, with the arm facing like this, we'll have the flat part this way. So we'll just put our Swaybar on now. Still have free movement there. So we'll just wipe off the excess grease. Let's go get this on the car. Alright, so the proper order of installation is to get the top of the end link positioned here and get the nut on just loosely. And then on both sides, you'll come through and you'll align this piece here. So you can't have the brackets bolted over here because you need a lot of movement in the sway bar, especially if you're using the stiff setting, which we can't really see here. But you need a lot of movement to get this bushing to line up here. So you need to do that on both sides, and then once you do that, then coming through here and aligning your bar and putting the bracket on is the last step. So that's the proper way of installation. If you do the bracket first, you won't be able to get the end link bushing in position here. So now with all of our bolts in position, the last things that came in the kit are these grease certs here. A couple of different names for them. I've always heard grease certs. So these just go into the bushing so we can keep that lubricated with fresh supply of grease. That'll help to cut down on noise. So I'll show you where those guys go. So those just screw into here, and it'll just make a little pathway into the bushing where when you grease it, it'll just surround that bushing and then keep it nice and lubricated. So if the sway bar ever gets noisy and begins to squeak, you can just come and put a little bit more grease into that grease cert. Alright, now that we have the car all ready to go with the sway bar installed and our race tires and race wheels on the car, we're going to go to autocross and see how that sway bar does and kind of give an opinion on how the sway bar does on the drive there as well. So this is a before video showing the car without the sway bar, and this is just with the stock suspension. And out of the factory, it liked to understeer a little bit more than I liked, and it just didn't quite have the right amount of rotation that I wanted. So like this turn, for example, I just wasn't able to quite get the car to turn in exactly how I wanted to. And so that's what I'm hoping that the sway bar addresses, is these kinds of issues I'm having. So it turns out the event immediately after I installed the sway bar was actually pretty slalom intensive. So this is a good test of the sway bar to see if it's doing what it needs to do. So this is the slalom portion here where the car enters in, and overall the car felt really good with the sway bar installed. So I was able to lift the rear tire a little bit and just get the car to rotate and then get on the gas and start going through the slalom again. So that's really what I was looking for and hoping out of this sway bar. So I think it overall worked really well, and for the value, I think, or for the price, it's a really good value. So overall, I think it was a pretty easy installation and definitely see improvement with the car. On the drive over, I didn't notice any noise from the sway bar, and I could feel even on the street that the steering was enhanced. So a little bit more responsiveness out of the car, even on the street. So if you have any questions, be sure to ask in the comments below, and I or somebody else hopefully will chime in and be able to answer your question. But as always, hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.